For that we can check if they have the same name here in the back, right? But we also want to check in which subfolder they are. For that we have the own folder. Let's get our geometry own folder. And if this is exactly equals exactly geometry underscore, why geometry underscore? Because this will give us the direct folder, right? And we will only want geometry underscore right now. And we can combine those two conditions with an AND. So, like that. Compile. And we should probably print here. Print, so we see it. Alright, I used the wrong thing here. We actually need the own folder here. Let's get the own folder. Put this in here. So, and now we will get only one hello. And this one it will be the one we have inside the same back name and the geometry. So we're exactly getting this one here. So what do we want to do with it now that we only get the ones inside here? Let's also get this one here, actually make a copy of that. So we have two, and I'm going to put another one inside. And with that we have two inside here, right? Those two are inside. And this one is outside. I want to keep this one outside because I always want to check if it's also doing it for that, which it shouldn't. What we want to do is take the geometry of those two inside and put it inside the combine. Most of the things we did here are not add-on related. Beside this thing here, this is the only thing that's add-on related, and the other things are just like default engine things to figure out things. Now what we need to do is we need to get a allocate compute mesh. This is most of the things we do now is, so we want to get our geometry and copy it inside our current child combine. For that we have a node copy mesh from component, and this is now add-on related. Let's plug this in when through, and we're going to make ourselves a reroute from this here, a reroute, and reroute it all the way in the front here. Reroute, maybe you could also make a variable, doesn't matter. And if we take this here, it's not going in. We need to get dynamic mesh component. Why do we need to do this? Now, this thing here, what this outputs here, is the same thing as this here, but because we are targeting here the geometry, it will give us this thing here, but from the geometry. And if we take a look here, what this thing is inside the geometry, this here inside the geometry is our actual box. So if we connect this here, and what we actually want to do is not connect this here because this will be the dynamic mesh, but we want the component, yeah, the component. So like that thing here, not the sub mesh. We want the whole thing essentially. We want to copy this component, this here, from our geometry into our mesh, so into this one here, and we have saved this as a variable, so we can just grab this variable and copy it inside. So let's see what happens if we compile this. We have a box here. Now it's clearly not where it should be. We have to also say that it should live, the space it lives inside, the position it lives inside. We need to tell it should live inside the actual combine. Currently it's just like setting it somewhere, I guess. For that we can, when we succeed, transform mesh. And what do we want to transform? We want to transform the mesh we created, and we can make relative transform, plug this in here, and we can say the thing we created should be relative to get actor transform to the current actor we are on, which is the combine. Let's compile this here, and we're going to see now it's overlapping. Though one thing, we have two here, right? We have one here and one here. Why is it only creating it for one? The reason is because we're using copy, and copy just overrides what we already have, I guess, at least. Because let's see, if we're dragging this guy out here, right, just into the dev world, and we compile this again, we have this one here. But if we drag it back in, because it's lower, it will first take this one here and override it with this one here. We need to do a little thing here, a little workaround for that. Well, we can try, first of all, instead of a copy, we can use a append, but I fear, wrong one, append mesh, that this will not work in the long run. Let's just plug this in here and this in here. Let's just plug this in. And we can essentially do the same thing. I'm going to move this a little bit down. And we want to append this mesh from our geometry. Actually, in this case, we need to use this one here because it's the actual mesh it wants. So we can append this here to our current combine. And let's just see. It's just somewhere again. So we need to also say it should live inside. And just copy this here and plug this in. And we need to get a transform from that. So get transform, wrong one. We need to get it from the component. Get transform, get world transform. There we go. Plug this in and let's see. Now we are getting 2. And if we move the geometry around, it currently will not update, right? But over here in the beginning, we made this additional editor tick. And if we just simply plug this inside here. Now the thing is, you can see, I could now just connect this in here, right? But the problem is that we are writing this variable from here. And as I explained before, get dynamic mesh component. This thing here is the exact same thing as this here. It's just the same. If we just, instead of connecting this here, connect it like that here, we're still getting the same thing. And we can use this tick as well. Let's compile this. All right, and you can see it's ticking constantly, yeah, every second, because we described it here in the parent. And if I now move the child around here in geometry, you can see every second it will update. Though you can clearly see it's like each second it adds something to it. So we have to get another workaround for that here. I'm going to connect it, disconnect this for a second here and compile it, just so we like not ending up with a bazillion objects. What we have to do here is we need to allocate compute mesh. What this will do, it will give us the same thing it will give us here or here, right? Just as an invisible mesh separated. By separating it, we can do a few more things. So let's just plug this in here. And we want for now to copy the mesh from our geometry into our current one. So we're going to copy mesh from component, and we want this component here. So we're copying our geometry mesh into an invisible one, which we just store for now. And as I showed you, we need to tell it where it lives. So on succeed, we're going to transform the mesh, this mesh here. This is the same thing as if I would plug this in here, just it's in a nice row, like it's going through here, right? It's the same thing. We could also make a variable here and then put it in somewhere. It's the same thing. This is the same thing as this here as a variable, whatever. And we need to make relative again, make relative transform, plug this in. And this one here should be relative to get actor transform. We're not going to see it if we compile this now. This is just invisibly stored. Yeah. But we can temporarily show this by getting our variable here, get, and plug this here instead of that one here. Compile this. We're going to see we get one. It's only going to show the last one, but it's actually doing it for both, yeah, because it like does it in a loop. So let's plug this in again. And now we can append. So let's get our append here and plug this in here. And what do we want to append? Now we stored our geometry inside an extra thing. So our geometry is currently in the extra thing, which we output here. We want to append this to our current one. So let's get this here. So if I now compile, you can see we got it in here, right? It's not updating because I unplugged the update here in front. We will still have the same problem for the moment. If I plug this in here, it will still constantly add new ones. Yeah. But by separating it, we can do another thing as well, which we're getting to in a second. And we don't need to transform it here because we already did this here. I mean, you could just plug this in here as well, I guess. But this is a bit more direct. We can do different things then. So like I said, with this update thing here, it doesn't refresh the blueprint. It doesn't do it from the complete beginning. Meaning here, before we append it, we have to delete everything first of all, so it can create a new one. So I made a little setup for that. Let's disconnect it for a second. It's a workaround, really, and they should implement this properly. We can get our variable here, and we can get max material ID. And for those who don't know, material ID is just a number of the materials we have. We can have multiple materials on one thing, we can have 20, whatever, but it starts with a 0 here. So 0 is the first material, 1 is the second, etc. And we can make a for loop, not a for each. And what this one does, it works the same thing as our for loop, just with a difference. We only give it, we tell it how many times it should loop essentially. And by just plugging this in directly, it will loop as many times as we have materials. 0 will be 1 tick, 1 will be 2 ticks, 2 will be 3 ticks. And since both start with 0, because the material ID also starts with 0, we just simply tick as many times as we have materials. So we can plug this in here. And then we can delete triangle by material ID. And we can plug this in here. We can plug this in here. And we can get our mesh and plug our mesh inside here. So essentially for each material ID, we're doing a tick and then we're deleting every material ID. So just everything is gone, right? And then on the complete, because we only want to do this when the thing is completed, when we're done with deleting everything, we're going to append. So if we take a look now, okay. Right, I didn't append the right mesh. So what we want to append is the thing we saved invisibly. So let's just plug this in here. We're going to eventually make a variable, but let's just compile this. We can see we got one thing here. It's not updating, but we can now connect the update here in the beginning, compile this, and you're going to see we move it around. Problem though is it does not do the same thing for the second one. The reason is we are deleting this every loop. So it creates all of this correctly as we see it. Yeah, it does exactly this thing for that one here. Deletes it again and then just does it for this one here. Meaning, I don't actually want to delete it here. So I'm just going to skip it for a second here. Our delete part. So disconnect this here. You can keep this appending. We just need to do this in the beginning, yeah, because when we think about it, before this here triggers, it also just resets everything. So we want to do this in the beginning here somewhere. So let's do it directly after we write our target variable, because we are using this one here. Let's make a sequence. And before we do anything else, we're going to make sure we delete the geometry before. Let's just compile this. And there we go. And it's nicely updating, and we can move those things around. We can also move our box around, right? So now we're adding the geometry properly to our combine. Let's make a little bit more space here, and we can press Z, C for comment, and delete whole geometry. All right, with that we already got a good part done. There's one more thing here in the back which I want to do, because currently we are just putting boxes together, right? But what happens if I move a box inside here, inside another box, right? And they are overlapping, right? So like they're not properly combining. We have double the vertices and whatever. I want to bool those together. Either we are appending it or we're booleaning it. So we can make a branch here because we want to make a decision here, and we're going to plug false in here. And if we want to bool it, so boolean or mesh boolean, also from the add-on. So if we want to bool it, go up and bool it. So which mesh do we want to bool it to? To our target mesh, to the one we're currently working in the combine. And what is the tool mesh? The tool mesh is this one here. You can actually make a nice rewrote note here. So that compile this. And you can see it's running up here. By the way, if you don't see this tick here, you can just select the thing in the viewport here, right? I have one of the combines in the viewport, and up here you can select it. So if you take a look now, ooh, you can see the green line still here, but those are actually combined, right? So now we want to manually change this for each individual one. So maybe we have one which we want to bool, but another one we don't want to bool. For that we need a Boolean variable here, right? So where do we put this, right? If I select one here, I want a Boolean right here where the box draw is, and decide should it be booled or not. So if I want this on the geometry, we also actually need to go to our geometry, right? And since every single one should have that, I'm going inside the parent. So in the parent, we can just make ourselves a variable and we call this should be booled question mark, and we can compile this, and by default we just make it wrong and we go back to our child combine. And because we are detecting all of our geometries here, we can just here follow the line. Yeah, we already moved one back here. I can just ask should be booled. We can just grab this variable from here. So, and we can put this below that, maybe make a nice reroute here like that. So we can put this in here. So compile. So currently it's not be booled, not going to be booled. And we need to make the instance editable. Compile. Because now here you can see, we see it. And with that instance editable, we can see that we have a checkbox here. Should it be booled or not? And you can see now it's booled. Now it's not. Now another thing I wanted to show you, you can see the box draw of our box here, the box draw, right? And the should be booled are currently in default. I want to give it a custom path here. So in the geometry parent and the child, right? We have two different things here. In the parent, we just made the booled because every child should have that. And over here we can give it a category. So if I give this a category box draw, I mean, we could name it like really whatever, compile it, you can see that this should be booled is now in a category box draw. And if I go to the child and put this box draw also in a box draw, make sure you have the same spacing, you can see they are both in the box draw. So what does this mean for us? If we, whenever you delete something from a viewport, it will tell you it's connected to something. Are you sure you want to delete it? To us, this doesn't matter because like we are expecting this. So our geometry, right? We can make another one here. And for example, what happens if I want to sort of, I don't know, make something like this here. Maybe drag another one sort of like this here. We can always enable snapping up here and make this nice or whatever. What if I want another one? Move you over here. Another one here. And I'm going to rotate you 90 degrees. We could essentially, I mean, there are easier ways. This is the reason why we are adding multiple childs to it. But for example, just now, we could just create ourselves a room. I'm doing this very roughly right now. A room, all right, and all of those could be booled. They are all booled, and we will not have like faces inside. It would be a proper room. We could just simply add a wall to it, right? Make the wall maybe a little bit thinner, something like that, and we would have a room with like walls and whatever.